Right. So we established that if you cook beets or turnips, you make a soup as opposed to squeezing their juice, where the taste and a lot of the substance of the vegetable goes out into the water. So that water is adama. So, for example, a potato soup, you don't make a separate shahakol and adama. You make adama on the whole thing. Even if you cook beets and only drank the beet soup or the turnip soup, you would say adama. So,
are you saying that soup normally is shahakol?
Right. Yeah, but not a vegetable or fruit soup. It takes the bracha of its fruit or vegetable.
Or what other soups are there? They usually take on something.
Right, but I'm just saying, well, because chicken soup is shahakol, obviously. In other words, let me elaborate. You make a chicken soup, right? So in my chicken soup, I put leek, carrots, celery, dill, and sometimes parsnip, okay? And an onion, of course, and garlic also. So I put all these vegetables in my chicken soup, but the primary purpose is the chicken soup. So the vegetables are only there to flavor it. And therefore, the bracha on the chicken soup is shahakol. Now, if you eat carrots from the soup, you like the carrots, so now the carrots become chashuv. They become important on their own, and you make a separate borei pri adama on the carrots in the chicken soup if you specifically intend to eat the carrots.
So
if a few bits of carrot fall in, then it's still all shahakol. But if you intend to eat the carrots, as a significant part of your bowl of soup, then you say adama on the carrots and shahakol on the soup.
So there is a product called osem.
Hold on, let me get back to one question at a time. Mr. Foyt, your question.
What about split pea?
So split pea soup. So on one hand, it's kitniyot. So kitniyot that change their form become shahakol. Nevertheless, many authorities would say that a split pea soup that's very thick, you would make adama on, especially if it has. So with a split pea soup, we often put sliced carrots in it and potatoes. So certainly, if there are visible vegetables in it, and that's an important part of what you're eating, you can make adama, and you don't also have to make a shahakol. If it's a thin split pea soup, like you get from the package, the instant kind, yeah, the tabachnik, if it's just split pea and there's no visible other vegetables, I would make shahakol because it's kitniyot. We'll get to that later. Now Rav Papa is going to raise a question that has implications for the laws of brachot, which again are very complicated. Have I told this group yet about why chocolate should really be borei pri ha'etz and not shahakol?
I don't think so, Rabbi.
Okay, so here goes. The chocolate is a confection made from cocoa solids, cocoa butter, milk or powdered milk, if it's milchix, and sugar or a sugar substitute. If it's parve chocolate, you leave out the milk stuff. Now, here, the halacha is, we discussed that, for example, raw beets, one says shahakol on, unless it's the custom in that place to eat raw beets, because they're not normally eaten raw. Conversely, cooked beets, even borscht, even beet soup, you would make borei pri adama on, because that's the normal way to eat it. Now, chocolate beans, the seeds of the cacao pod, are not normally eaten raw. They're not even normally eaten whole, roasted, because they're not terribly good. They're bitter. They're processed into a mush, and then you separate the cocoa butter and the cocoa solids, and so on. The normal way to eat the fruit of the chocolate, the cocoa tree, is as either a drink, which would be shahakol anyways, or as a confection mixed with sugar and other things. Since that's the normal way to eat it, and we don't normally eat it any other way, the bracha should be Boe Pri Ha'etz, he who creates the fruit of the tree, because that's the most normal way that people eat. The same way, the normal way to eat, I don't know, beans is to eat them cooked.
We're talking about chocolate?
Yeah, so chocolate comes from trees. It's the seeds of the cocoa pod. And therefore, since the most normal way to eat chocolate is as a confection, which can have up to 60, 70% cocoa solids, and we don't normally eat whole cocoa beans. So the normal way to eat something, you say it's normal bracha. So since it grows on a tree, it should be Bari Priya 8. And here is where language comes in. However, when we used to say chocolate in the 16th and 17th centuries, 17th and 18th centuries, when chocolate became popular in Europe, it meant hot chocolate. The original way to eat chocolate was to mix cocoa powder and sugar and milk and drink it hot. So if you talked about chocolate in France or England, among the people who could afford it in the 17th century, chocolate meant the drink. Since the drink is primarily water and milk and so on, and the chocolate flavors it like coffee, like tea, what is the bracha on a hot drink? Shahako. So we got used to saying the bracha on chocolate is shahako. In the 19th century, people began mass producing chocolate bars. And so when you ask someone, what's the bracha on chocolate? The answer was shahako. So because people didn't realize that a chocolate bar and chocolate is not the same thing. But since everyone got used to saying shahako, the bracha stayed shahako.
So this day?
To this day.
What about
And we do not make ha'etz on chocolate. I knew of one eccentric rabbi who said ha'etz on chocolate when it was more than 50% cocoa. You know, like the dark chocolate says 50, 75%.
72.
Right. So when it was more than 50% cocoa solids, he said ha'etz. But that's not the norm. Yes, Bobby.
In the cup, the brand name is called Reefs. It's a cup containing chocolate surrounding peanut butter.
No, peanut butter.
A combination of
chocolate and peanut butter. So the question is, what's the main purpose of your eating it, chocolate or the peanut butter? But the fact is, peanut butter, because it is kitniot and it is processed and it doesn't look like peanuts anymore, is, according to many, shahako. Since the chocolate shahako and the peanut butter may be shahako, ask your local rabbi what to do. So the assumption would be that on a peanut butter cup, one says shahako. The more complicated question is the almond butter cups that they're part of, that they have at Trader Joe's. Butter cups, because almond butter might be ha'etz, because it's made from almonds. But the general premise is that since the normal way to eat almonds is whole, and almond butter is not, the most common way to eat it, so maybe you'd say, so you can say shahako on the almond butter cups too.
Today, almond milk is very popular.
Right, but almond milk is definitely shahako because it's primarily water. Right. Okay. Now,
Papa, we said.
So we're up to Rav Papa. And I will bring in various laws of brachot as we go through this, because the laws of brachot are complex, though the OU has a good site, and you can also, I believe, the Alter Rebbe's laws of brachot from the Siddur are on Sichas English website and so on. And I think there's a pretty good discussion on Chabad.org also, as well as OU. And Star K also has a section on brachot. Okay.
I had a question here.
Yes.
If you're in doubt whether to say one bracha or the other, suppose you say both.
No, you don't say both, because we don't say God's name in vain. You wouldn't want to say both. However, let us say you have a berry that you're not sure if it's eitz or adama, the fruit of the tree of the ground. You could say a bracha on an apple, as long as you plan on eating part of the apple, and then a bracha on a carrot, and have in mind that whatever this is, the bracha goes on it. Because once you make a bracha on one kind of fruit, and you have other kinds of fruit in front of you, one bracha exempts them all. But the general rule of what we do when we're not sure is to say the more encompassing bracha. So if you're not sure if something's a fruit or a vegetable, you say the bracha on the vegetable. You're not sure what bracha something is, you say shahako. But we try to, with he who creates, he who brings everything into being by his word. But we try to avoid using that particular cop-out. But if you don't know what to do and you want to eat something and you're not sure, you say shahako.
Shahakol is the best bracha.
Now, Omer Rav Papa. So now we're going to go back to the question of the liquid that vegetables are cooked in. Omer Rav Papa. Rav Papa says, Pshitali, it's obvious to Maya de salka. Water that beets are cooked in is like beets. Now, the borscht that people drink Pesach, which is like mixed, it's not like a vegetable soup. Because when Russian Jews say borscht, they mean a beet soup with meat, potatoes, and other things in it. Yes. But when Galicianer or Polish Jews say borscht, they mean a mixture of beet juice, eggs, and so on that you drink, raw eggs, etc., that you drink on Pesach.
But then you add it.
Right. So where the beet juice is only part of it, and there's other things added, you probably say shahako. But if you beet soup, even on the liquid, you say adam. So Papa says it's obvious to me that the water that beets are cooked in is just like the beets. Umaya, the water that that turnips are cooked in is just like the turnips. Umaya, the kulashalki, and anything you boil, even the potato that isn't discovered yet. If you are drinking the water, if you are eating the liquid they're cooked in, it follows the bracha of that thing. So if you make a fruit soup, you cook like whole pears and apples in water. So you have the fruit floating in the liquid. The liquid is ha'etz, like the fruit, and not shahaka. Boy Papa. Papa now raised the question. Maya de Shivta, the water of Shivta. Rashi translated anis. What do you have? Yosela, what do you have? It's
Dill.
39A4.
Rabbi Steinsaltz says dill.
Oh, a very traditional Ashkenazic addition to chicken soup. So Rashi has anise, but okay. So dill or anise, some kind of herb. The point is that this vegetable, this herb, is not something you cook to eat it as a substance. It's something you cook to give a flavor. So if you boil dill or anise or some herb that you put a small amount of it in the water to flavor the water, but you don't intend to actually eat the vegetable. So our Papa wants to know, what is the law of Maya de Shivta? Ma'alim Mesuke time of the is the purpose of the dill or the anise or whatever. Is it to give it a taste? In other words, the goal is to drink water that tastes like this herb. Or is it merely done to remove the bad taste? In other words, regular boiled water has a flat taste. So you place this dill in it, it makes it refreshing. Like in fancy restaurants, they'll put some mint leaves in the water just to give it not a flat taste. You don't really taste the mint. So the question is it just to bad taste the water, or is it to give it its own taste? So Tashima, come in here. I will read you a Mishnah that says as follows. Hasheves mishenotznatam b'keira ein bo mishum truma. Sheves, which is this herb, the dill or the anise, but the dill, let's say, once it gives the taste into the soup, you don't have to take truma from it because it's garbage. In other words, it has no eating. And it doesn't become tame, the tame of food, because it's not food anymore. Shema mina, the mesuke tava of Allah, it's there to improve the taste of the water. It's not there to give substance to it. Shema mina, from this we see. Now we come to the question of, now we get to a very problematic issue. I mean, it's problematic, it's amply discussed, and that has to do with the question of bread, that you do something to it that makes it change its form or its appearance or its taste. Well, its bread has the king of all brachot, hamotzi. But if it's no longer bread but something else, it's not hamotzi anymore. The question that the Talmud will now dip its toes into the water of is what constitutes bread not being bread anymore. But before that, Joe had a question about osem and soup.
Oh, there is a powder that if you mix it into hot water, it tastes just like chicken broth.
Yes, and there is an Israeli version that is kosher basari that is actually made from dehydrated and powdered chicken with a little bit of chicken fat added. That's how they make it.
This one is not.
There's a Parav one, but there's a fleshig one they sell in
Oh.
Israel. The point being that soup powder, yes. So that would definitely be shahako because it's made from chicken, and the vegetables, the dehydrated carrots and onions, are just there to give it a flavor. So that would definitely be shahako. That is like the story, the late 70s, early 80s Jewish Russian comedian Yakov Smirnov said. Is he said that in Russia you have to cook everything from scratch. So when he comes to America, they take him to a grocery store, and the first thing he sees is a little jar. It says coffee. He says, "What's this?" He says, "This is coffee powder. You don't have to go brew coffee. You just throw some powder into hot water, and you have coffee." So he says, "Wow, America, what a country!" And then he goes to another aisle, and he sees. And he says, "This is kosher soup powder. You don't have to sit and boil vegetables for hours and hours. You just throw it into the hot water, and presto, you have soup." And so he says, "Soup powder." He says, "Wow, America, what a country." Then I go down the next aisle, he says, and I pull my host and I say, "Look, America, what a country." I saw a container that said baby powder. So, but soup powder is shahako. Okay, but soup powder is shahako. So, why? Because again,
You mix baby.
you mix the powder in the water, you get a baby. Yeah, right. But the point is that in many soups, including chicken soup, the vegetables are there for a flavor. If you like the carrots or the celery, then you say a separate adama on the carrots and the celery because you're really eating them as something separate. Of course, eat it a Friday night dinner. You already said hamotzi, so hamotzi covers everything, as we'll see later in a different chapter. Okay, now let's go a little bit further. So Shemami, no, we established that where the dill or the anise or whatever the particular herb is only there to flavor. Like if you use fresh basil in a soup, the bracha will remain shahakol if there's nothing else there to change the bracha. Omer Rav Chia says, Barashi says, Past sanuma bakarim of hamotzi. Dry bread in a plate of hot food, you say hamotzi. So let us say you put, classic example, croutons made from bread. You put them in your chicken soup and they become mushy. So he says you say hamotzi.
What?
Dry bread, if you put dry bread in a soup or in a bowl of stew, and the dry bread then absorbs and becomes mushy, it's still hamotzi. That is Rav Chia Barashi's position.
And what's the halacha?
And you say hamotzi. Upligi de Rav Chia, argues the Rav Chia. The Amar Rav Chia, tzarech shetichel bracha imapas. Chia says the bracha hamotzi has to be done with the bread. In other words, breaking the bread. In other words, you say hamotzi and break the bread. If it's already broken into small pieces, according to this, don't worry, this won't be the halacha. It's no longer hamotzi. Hamotzi, it only says, is where you break a small piece off a whole loaf. So according to Rav Chia, who's not the same as Rav Chia Barashi, obviously, regular Rav Chia says that you only say hamotzi where you are breaking a piece off a complete loaf, which, as we'll see, is not the halach. Maskala Rav asked a question. What does it make a difference if it's dry bread or undried bread? In other words, since the bracha has to be on the piece you break off the loaf, so b'shumdik, because you have to finish the bracha, when you finish breaking it, it's broken. Rav says, wait a second. Rav says, well, I don't understand this. You say the issue with the dry pieces of bread is because they're already broken off the loaf, so they shouldn't get hamotzi, only mizono. Even bread that's not dry, even fresh bread, if you already cut it up, it should be or not hamotzi, according to Rav Chia. Because Rav Chia holds.
What did you do with it?
He holds once it's cut up, you don't say hamotzi anymore. Only when what you it's not the halach. Elo Marava, turn to page 39b to finish today's learning. Elo Marava Mavorech, you say a bracha and then you break. In other words, that the fact is that you should say first the bracha on the whole loaf and then break it off. And Rav Chia says you say the bracha as you break it.
It's to break bread.
Right, yeah.
Not cut.
Okay.
Okay.
So 1 minute, we're almost done. Nardoi did like Rav Chia, and the Rabbanan did like Rava. In other words, Rav Chia, again, the argument is: do you say the bracha as you break the bread, or do you say the bracha then break it? Omer Ravina, Omerli Eimavuch, Ovad Rav Chia. Ravina says, they told me that your father's mother, your grandmother, from your father's side, did like Rav Chia. The Omer Rav Chia, Tzarach Shtik LeBracha Mapas. You should finish the bracha with breaking the bread. So you break it as you say hamotzi. Rabbanan of the Karava. The sages did like Rava. So even though Rav Chia's grandmother, Ravina's grandmother did like Rav Chia, the sages did like Rava, and they're the majority. The law is like Rava, that he says first you make the bracha, then you break. So we're not sure about when bread stops being bread, but we do know that when you say the bracha on a whole loaf, so let's say you have a whole bagel or a whole roll, even during the week, you say hamotzi, then you break it or cut it. In other words, you don't say the bracha as you cut it. You say the bracha on a whole piece. The salt comes later. But the point is, it's chashuv. It's considered respectful to say a bracha on a whole loaf. A whole loaf is more respectable than a piece. Of course, nowadays we buy sliced bread, so we lose that opportunity. And we'll learn a lot more. There's all kinds of halachas about slicing bread, and we will learn all about that in future weeks.
You just
Rabbi?
Just one note, even though it says there's a class tomorrow, no class tomorrow, and Wednesday. And Wednesday we should have a class, but I'm not sure. So no class tomorrow and no class Wednesday unless you hear from me that there is. Okay?
Rabbi?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Last time you spoke about breaking bread on Shabbos, I wanted to ask. I didn't get a chance to ask.
Go ahead.
What's the procedure? Do we cut it or do we cut it a little bit and break it? Or?
So during the week, what you do is you cut all around the loaf of bread so that it still hangs together. And then you say hamotzi, and then you break it and cut it to make least of a hefsek. On Shabbos, you should say a bracha on a completely whole loaf. So what we do is we just make a sign. You make like a very thin scratch with the knife so you know where to cut so it's not to interrupt. You say the bracha hamotzi, then you cut on that line. But you don't scratch deep enough to remove any of the bread. because then
Okay,
it's
so-
not a full
so we
open.
We do cut through. We don't cut it and then break it, or we don't break it.
Okay, so some people have a custom that you cut almost to the bottom and then break. That is, and it may even be brought in the laws of baking bread. You cut almost to the bottom and then you break it.
But you
But you
said,
don't tear it apart just without cutting it, but you cut it almost to the bottom and then you tear it, then you break it.
but you just said that you say a motzi and taste everything before you put salt?
No, you put salt first.
That's what I'm.
First, you make a little on Shabbos. First, you make a little scratch. Then you say amotzi. Then you cut it. Then you take a piece and dip it in salt and eat it. Then you give it to everyone else. Then you give out to everyone else. Okay, we will have a lot more to learn about bread and washing and amotzi and benching and all those things. Stay tuned. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and a happy Hanukkah.
Rabbi,
And yes,
We're looking at Hanukkah.
did you have the mysticism class yesterday? Because I waited for 15 minutes and nothing happened.
we probably started about 7:15 because we had to get the equipment going. So we probably started around then. So we did have the class, but we started a little bit late.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you come to a class, don't see we're there like 5 minutes in, come back 10 minutes later, usually be on. But again,
Okay.
I do not know, definitely no class Tuesday, and I don't know about Wednesday. So Wednesday is not, unless you hear from me that it is. All the best.
Is Yiddish still on?
Yiddish is still on Zoom, 10 a.m. every Tuesday.
Okay. Thank you.
Take care.